Coming up on Tech News Weekly, it's me, Jason Howell, my co-host Mikah Sargent, and our guest today is Alex Kantrowitz from the Big Technology Podcast. We talk about Facebook papers, the consortium, the sorting through it all, Facebook's earnings and why they are largely unaffected by the bad stuff in the Facebook papers, and we have breaking news as Facebook finally announces its new name during our interview, plus how Apple's privacy changes affected earnings for some companies more than others, and finally, Android 12 is no longer the latest version of Android, even though it came out last week. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 207, recorded Thursday, October 28th, 2021. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike harnesses the power of every click, every action, and every ally to grow stronger and stop cyber threats before they can stop you. Join the fight and experience the power of Falcon Platform for free today at crowdstrike.com/twit.
And by Akamai. Akamai powers and protects life online and is changing how we live, work, and play. See how Akamai is unleashing the internet of possibilities for the biggest brands in the world. Visit akamai.com/TNW today to learn more.
And by Melissa. The U.S. Postal Service processes more than 98,000 address changes daily. Is your customer contact data up to date? Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
And I'm the other one, Jason Howell. Good to see you, Mikah. And if there's one word that feels like it's very present in the world of technology news today, it's Facebook, unfortunately. Or fortunately,
Facebook.
Depending on your view of Facebook.
I was thinking you were going to say Metaverse, but Facebook works too. It's a more general term than hearing Metaverse about 1,100 times this morning.
And here's the thing, it might not be Facebook for much longer. Who knows? By the end of this show, we might know a new name for Facebook. But let's wait to get there. First of all, Facebook, if you hadn't heard, in the news all across the board. I mean, it's an avalanche of news, it seems like, this past week especially, more than normal even. Not a whole lot of it has been good news for the company necessarily. Today they're having their Connect event, so maybe that's the good news that they're putting out there in the world, but a lot of bad to balance it too. So we invited Alex Kantrowitz from the Big Technology Podcast to join us for a full half hour to walk through it all. Welcome back to the show, Alex.
It's great to be here. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah, great to see you too. It's been a while. You've been on TWiT a number of times. I love you on the big show. I love when you're on the big show. So it's good to get you back over here too. So
great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. You know, we've got the consortium to talk about. We've got the Facebook papers. There was an earnings call earlier this week, and then, of course, Connect. So we're going to, touch on little pieces of this throughout the next half hour. But let's start with the Facebook papers. I came across your article that I believe you posted yesterday, and we'll talk about that in a second. But these are the papers, for those who have been hiding under a rock, that really set the foundation for the whistleblower, Frances Haugen's testimony to Congress 3 weeks ago. They were first shared with the Wall Street Journal, and then recently they were broadened out to a wider but still a smaller kind of coalition of journalistic outlets. You happen to have your hands on the papers. You're part of that group, so congratulations for that. Why do you think they were distributed in this way, and what is the effect? Because what I've noticed is with all of these different outlets having access to this, like, it's not like I wouldn't want that to be the case, but it kind of becomes noisy as a result.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I would say maybe we should have even more people have access to them, but we can get to that. The reason why they were distributed in this way, I just spoke with Lawrence Lessig, who's Frances Haugen's lawyer, and he's been advising her on this. And my interview with him is going to show up on Big Technology Podcast on this upcoming Wednesday. But we spoke exactly about this issue. And what he told me was that Francis initially gave these documents to Congress. And it was Congress that said maybe we should have a more broad coalition of news organizations outside the Wall Street Journal reviewing this stuff. And that's how they ended up forming this coalition of, a little bit more than a dozen news organizations in North America and Europe to go through it and publish stories based off of what they see. And it's been a drip of documents. So there was apparently like one big chunk of them. I wasn't a part of that. But this Monday, they let a lot more people in, and they've been adding new documents every single day so far. So for them, the idea is twofold. One is, they want the information in these documents to be carefully reviewed and translated to the public in a way that they'll understand. And two is, if they want those articles, they want to give the news organizations a little bit of incentive to actually do the work as opposed to just dumping them on the web, WikiLeaks style. And that's why they've kept it into this small group. I don't fully agree. I mean, I don't agree with the idea that it should be kept with, in such a small group of news outlets. There's so much in there and there are plenty of stories to be had. But that's at least the logic that they have on their end in terms of this release strategy.
So that's their logic. You, like I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, and like you've mentioned, you wrote for Neiman Lab that, being included in the consortium, you are familiar, you have access to all of these documents, and you believe that this consortium needs to be dissolved. So I guess walk through a little bit of that. Like what is the benefit of dissolving this consortium and just making this fully public to everyone who wants to take a look at them? And who do you think is gonna really scrutinize these? Is it journalists, or are you looking for? Are you thinking that the everyday user of Facebook deserves to see these things, and would even?
Yeah, so I think it should be journalists from countries all over the world that get a chance to see these, not just those in North America and Europe. The fact that 90% of people that use Facebook are outside of these regions or somewhere whereabouts. Yet they're not included in the news organizations that are reviewing the documents, to me seems odd and wrong and something we should rectify as soon as we can. And now, it doesn't just apply to journalists. We could have journalists, but we could also have academics. These documents will be extremely useful to the work that they do. There's so much data in them. There are so many experiments that academics should see. And right now, the academics have been trying to run their own experiments on what happens on social media. But if you append, their knowledge and what we see in these files, our body of work on the social media companies will just be expanded greatly, and we'll understand better what these companies are doing to our society and ourselves. And so, I really do believe that we need to have broad access to this thing. And when I say the coalition should be dissolved, I don't mean just like, again, I don't want the documents dumped WikiLeaks style, because there are a number of privacy, security, and legal concerns that would be involved then, especially with the names of Facebook employees. Like, if their names are in these comment sections, they shouldn't just be made public. They obviously never posted this with the, anticipation that they would, that now be able to be seen by the whole world. These discussions doesn't mean they're not important to us, but it does mean that when we do release them, we should be careful to limit the blowback to the people earnestly participating in these discussions. And so this kind of comes down to my proposal. When I say dissolved, I mean the coalition should find a way to redact these documents and put them out there in a safe and privacy respecting way, and just do it as soon as possible. Because again, if 90% of the population is outside of our regions that are using Facebook, but only we are writing about this stuff, that it's wrong. It's just not what should happen. And I had messages after I wrote that Neiman story from journalists in Italy and in India and in countries around the world saying, hey, how do I get my hands on these things? And I think we need to figure out, at the very least, an expedited process to get these in their hands so they can translate what they see inside them to the people living in their regions.
Yeah, and I guess the more attention on this, the more scrutiny that it can be put through, the more we're going to learn from them. And speaking of what we're learning from them, you do have access to this information, this intense flow of information. From your perspective, looking through this, what are a few of the most alarming in your mind, alarming discoveries from this dump?
Well, look, I think the Wall Street Journal in its initial round of stories has done a pretty good job identifying the biggest problems in Haugen's documents. what I'm personally interested in, and so again, like that stuff, in particular, the fact that Facebook optimized for meaningful social interactions and ended up making people just kind of angrier at each other. I think that's an issue that needs to be examined and a problem that needs to be fixed. I think there are some concerns with what's going on with teens in these platforms, but we do need to put some scientific rigor behind it and not just self-reported studies coming from teens. The idea that there are cartels that are using these platforms and human traffickers are also alarming. Which again, all the stuff that the Wall Street Journal did a great job highlighting. Now, if there's one thing I'll say, it's like we have this leftover batch of documents that are now being distributed to these news organizations, and I think rightfully so. Many of them have gravitated towards the big fires, right? If it bleeds, it leads. They're going for like the biggest problems. And we should address the biggest problems that Facebook is dealing with. That being said, we can learn a lot from the more mundane studies that are in these documents. In fact, there's a popular notion now that we should turn off the newsfeed algorithm and just have everything flow in a reverse chronological way, and that will fix Facebook. And that's why people are saying maybe we turn off Section 230 protections for stuff that algorithms amplify. Well, Facebook actually did a study looking at what happens if you turn off the ranking algorithm in newsfeed. And I dug through that experiment and I wrote about that in Big Technology. And they actually found that integrity issues spike, quality goes down. You end up seeing a lot more content from groups, which is, as we know, somewhat problematic. Many of those groups, that's a place where QAnon was able to fester. So anyway, I think that like the cool thing about it right now is that we'll be able to get a much better understanding of how Facebook operates. We'll be able to test some of our hypotheses, such as that newsfeed algorithm thing, with data, and that will make the entire conversation around Facebook more nuanced, more educated, and as you mentioned, Jason, we can work towards actual solutions as opposed to dropping sound bites in there that get a lot of retweets but don't really solve anything.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that over the last couple of years. Now, Facebook has, shared its earnings earlier this week. According to its earnings call, the company isn't hurting, at least not in a financial sense. It seems like shareholders are okay with what's happening at Facebook, because Facebook's making them a whole lot of money. In light of all of this information, is that what is it going to take, or should it be the kind of thing that information like this directly influences shareholder interest and concern? Like it seems to be a disconnect to me in my mind that we've got on one hand this avalanche of information that is really not good about the company, its influence and impact on society, all these issues, and then on the other hand, everybody's applauding because Facebook's still making bank and everybody's getting rich off of it. So I don't know how to navigate or negotiate the differences there. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. We've seen this happen all throughout the years with Facebook, is that it goes through these various scandals, and then its earnings come and it crushes them, and stock goes up despite like the weeks of bad news that have preceded it. And that's what happened again this week. Now, one way you can look at this is you could say that the bad news is already sort of priced into Facebook stock. Facebook does trade at a discount compared to Google, so something to think about. Like, it actually does have an impact potentially. But the thing is, what happens with this information? That's sort of what you would ask when you're thinking about advertiser and investor point of view. And advertisers aren't moving away from Facebook. To them, the fact that Apple has helped pull back tracking is actually a much bigger concern than any of the societal stuff. That's the thing that they're worried about when I speak with them. Talk about incentives in our society. I think that's pretty telling. Investors, obviously, every time we go through this situation, it's buy the dip. And so, a lot of people just buy that dip, and the stock is, floats pretty nicely. And then also they did a stock buyback, right? Sort of, a friend told me it's like bribing investors, right? It's like, we're going to give essentially as a free dividend or free boost to the stock by putting, I think it was like $50 billion into it or something to that nature, maybe 50 million. Something with the 50. Anyway, long story short, we very rarely do see this stuff, directly impact the company. And again, it's not just investors and advertisers, but it's users. People still use it, and the government doesn't do anything. So it's sort of like, all right, well, what do you expect from Wall Street?
Yeah, indeed. Well, we have you for another 15 minutes. We're going to take a quick break and thank the sponsor of this episode. And then when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Connect, which is happening literally right now, and the Metaverse. And hopefully, maybe we'll find some sort of name change and some, well, actually, I'm seeing it right now on my screen. It's called Meta. So we're going to talk all about Meta when we come back. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by CrowdStrike. You've seen the headlines. We talk about it all the time here at TWiT. Ransomware attack is just a thing that we cannot stop talking about because it seems like it's everywhere. It's holding businesses hostage. It can feel like it's a matter of time before they come for you. And you're going to be in that position where you have to decide, do you actually pay the ransom or do you end up losing everything? And you know what? It doesn't have to be a this or that situation. You do have a third option. And that is, do you defeat your adversaries before the fight even starts? That's what CrowdStrike is all about. With CrowdStrike, you're not alone in the battle against ransomware. A secure future demands a shared defense. And that's why CrowdStrike's Falcon platform uses their threat graph power by advanced AI to analyze behavior on your devices, on your servers, your cloud workloads, to find the threats and stop them. We spoke with CTO Michael Santonis, and we actually asked him, can you explain about how CrowdStrike's threat graph actually helps to find the threats? Here's what he had to say.
All the data points, the signals that we get come from the endpoints and the workloads that we have around the world. So we have an incredibly distributed network of customers from all around the world. And Threat Graph enables our platform to correlate those approximately 7 trillion endpoint-related events per week in real time.
Their security platform delivers the industry's most powerful set of tools to fight today's most sophisticated cyber attacks, all delivered via the cloud through a lightweight, intelligent agent. Forrester study actually finds Falcon Complete delivers 403% ROI, and in turn, that gives you 100% confidence. CrowdStrike harnesses the power of every click, every action, every ally to grow stronger and stops cyber threats before they can stop you. Falcon Complete stops breaches every hour of every day through expert management, threat hunting, monitoring, remediation. It's also backed by CrowdStrike's breach prevention warranty. And they don't just say that, they guarantee it for Falcon Complete managed customers who receive a warranty covering up to $1 million in the event of a breach. Terms and conditions apply. Gartner Magic Quadrant, by the way, also named CrowdStrike a leader for endpoint protection platform for 2021. So congrats there. Join the fight and experience the power of Falcon platform for free today. Go to crowdstrike.com/twit. That's crowdstrike.com/twit. CrowdStrike, because what we've built together is worth defending together. And we thank CrowdStrike for their support of Tech News Weekly.
All right, folks, we are back from the break, just in time for a break of the news, that is. It has officially happened. Facebook has announced that it is rebranding, I guess. The company's rebranding and going by the name Meta now. Apparently, Mark Zuckerberg says that Meta has its root in meaning beyond. And so Facebook is going beyond what it was originally into so much more. And joining us again after the break to talk about everything that Facebook has announced thus far at its Connect event is Alex Kantrowitz of the Big Technology Podcast. Welcome back to the show, Alex.
Great to be back. Thanks again for having me.
Yes. So let's get into things. Let's start with this name thing, because I think this is the big kind of kickoff. And as you said earlier, name change isn't super important. It's about what other changes might come with it. But with this name change, a lot of the early rumors about it surrounded the reasoning behind it. And I'm curious if you also feel that this is Facebook trying to get out from under the way that folks seem to feel about Facebook and the ties that it has to spreading misinformation, or to, as you mentioned even earlier, how it was supposed to improve upon casual conversation, but has resulted in everyone yelling at each other. Is this change about the company trying to broaden its horizons? I guess the pun is intended there. Or is it about simply rebranding to get away from the name Facebook?
There was a Indiana Pacers player. His name was Ron Artest, and he was a bit of a hothead and got into some trouble when he went into the stands. After a fan threw a cup of I think it was like beer on him, and him and his fellow teammates sort of got into it with the fans. And he was suspended for a large chunk of the season. There was just a documentary about this on Netflix. And he ended up changing his name from Ron Artest to Meta World Peace. And, by changing his name to Meta World Peace, he decided that, he didn't want to be associated with that player that would jump into the stands. He wanted to be someone who believed in tranquility and good things for the globe. And that, I believe, is what we're seeing with Facebook today, where, they have endured a long series of scandals. And for them, they want to change this narrative. They take their suspension, although they've really kept going, and come back and be Meta, just like Ron Artest. And so that's what I think is happening. For them, it's hard to say. I mean, certainly took everybody's attention off of the Frances Haugen stuff for a minute. But if you're a corporate branding expert, you'd probably be like, all right, well, it doesn't hurt, Facebook. I mean, it's not going to get much worse. So go for it. And that's what we're seeing.
That's a good point. Yeah, not going to get much worse. That's a really good point. All right. So we've got Facebook rebranding as Meta. And the reason why Facebook says that is, again, going beyond everything, et cetera. And the metaverse is this huge hashtag of a word that has come out, particularly surrounding Facebook. This idea that you would have this, be it this mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality space where you could exist with other people. But Facebook's focus seems to be surrounding kind of the business side of the metaverse. Can you talk about kind of what you know about Facebook's ongoing plans for the metaverse? I know, again, a lot of this was just announced today, but the rumors leading up to this surrounding the metaverse and Zuckerberg's early conversations about it, you might have some insights there, because I'm curious the kind of the consumer side of things for the metaverse and what we can expect, but then also the business side of things and what everyone can expect in terms of, will there be ads flying at our face while we're trying to hang out with our sister from across the country?
Well, here's the most important thing. The thing I think has been most overlooked is that, and I think Zuckerberg was so explicit about it today that we're no longer going to overlook it, but Facebook hates being subject to the whims of Apple. Facebook and Apple really don't like each other. Facebook doesn't like Apple's fee. It doesn't like the fact that, Apple, it's subject to Apple's rules and regulations. In fact, looking back, that Apple took Facebook's internal apps offline because it violated some Apple policy, and Facebook couldn't work for a day because of that. So there's absolutely no love lost between Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg. And what Zuckerberg wants is a world where he's free of intermediaries that will mediate the relationship between him and his users. And so why is Facebook so taken with this idea for the metaverse, something that, basically has us living in VR and doing all of our computing there? And it's because Facebook controls the operating system. And he was very explicit in his talk today, talking about how, when it comes to the metaverse, there will be low fees. It will be developer friendly. You can sideload apps. I mean, it felt to me like a 1 hour long subtweet of Apple's business practices. And Apple's come at Facebook hard, right? They've also cut off the company's ability largely to target ads off of the app and to track people off the app, which has really hit Facebook's business, although we didn't see it so bad in this most recent earnings report. And so, Facebook, I actually broke news last week that Facebook said it wants to have a knife fight with Apple, right? And so this is the knife fight. This is what we're watching. It's two of the biggest companies, two of the most powerful companies that we have in this country and the world, taking their knives out and getting to stabbing. And this is Facebook's attempt to stab back at Apple.
That makes sense. Yes, there was, as you put it, sort of a subtweet section where they were talking about how they see the metaverse existing and how it won't do this, that, and the other. And all of the things that they were mentioning were all of the things that people criticize Apple's App Store practices about. So that was interesting to see. They brought on a a creator or a creative, I guess, who they were talking to about doing sort of makeup and cosmetics in the metaverse, and how people would pay for the privilege of purchasing products that would be exclusive to them in the metaverse. And so we can kind of sort of picture that future. But there was a huge focus on the business side of things too, of the space where we have corporate kind of creating metaverse spaces where people can go and work together. And I'm curious if you think that this is more of a result of, our pandemic living, or if the metaverse kind of always, in the same way that HoloLens, it started out as maybe it was going to be a consumer product, and they realized that Microsoft's HoloLens was better for sort of the corporate area. Do we think that's the same thing here, where eventually it would have been some sort of corporate technology, but they just got there faster because of the pandemic? Or what are just your thoughts in general on their focus on the business side of things?
Well, I think that Facebook did a good job setting expectations at the very beginning, where they said, this isn't stuff we're going to roll out right now. It's not a typical developer conference. We're really going to lay out our vision for the future. And I think that's particularly important because you think about their vision for the future. This is something that's going to not happen this year, not happen next year, but it might happen 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the road. VR technology simply is just not at the point where it's going to be something that people would rather get into virtual reality versus, talking to somebody on a Zoom or in person. In person is still pretty cool. I hate to break it to the folks at Facebook, but people still like the real world. And, virtual reality, like if this stuff was going to take off, why didn't it take off during the pandemic? We were all stuck at home. It would have been amazing. And it's just the fact that the technology isn't anywhere close to where it needs to be. So I think there is a good case to be made that, maybe 5, 10 years down the line, we will maybe conduct some meetings in virtual reality, maybe put on AR glasses and have some hologram of a coworker beam in to the conference table with us. But I do think that it's important in this discussion to just highlight the fact that it's going to take a long, long time to get to this place. And so, I personally, we're here at Big Technology, and, we're tech forward. We like to use tech in the workplace, but I swear to you, I'm not asking anyone to meet with me in virtual reality anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm not feeling that either. And I actually really enjoy the virtual reality experience. One question I have about this, I'm curious to know your take on this. Right now, the VR that we know, the VR that the metaverse, as Zuckerberg kind of spelled out today, runs on the Quest and the Quest 2 headset, which runs on Android, which is owned by Google. How important is it, do you think, for Facebook to eventually build its own operating system to control its entire destiny here? Or is that even necessary? What do you think about that?
It's a really good question. Look, I sat with Mark Zuckerberg and talked to him about this when I was reporting out Always Day One. And he talked about the fact that, a lot of operating systems doesn't give you the control that you would like, especially if you're a company like Facebook, to interact with your users in a way that you think is best. So to give you an example. So Zuckerberg told me that the thing is with apps, in a phone operating system, you pick you pick the app, and then you pick the person you want. So you pick the action, and then you pick the person you want to do it with. In real life, you pick the person first, right? Hey, let's hang this weekend, and then you pick the action that you want to take. So I think that he wants that control. Obviously, building on Android allows you a much greater level of control than being an app on the iPhone. And for them, the most important key is to have a paradigm shift where we go from using our phones to using virtual reality. And as soon as we get there, if they're controlling that number one headset, sort of doesn't matter what the underlying operating system is, as long as it allows them to customize, and Android will. And so then that's a win for them.
I guess my last question for you is, along with the shift in the name, you mentioned there could be some other changes that take place at the company. Do we think anything else will happen outside of the name change as Facebook continues to focus on the metaverse and sort of what's next in social space?
Yeah, look, I thought there was a chance that Chris Cox was going to become, who's the chief product officer of Facebook, was going to become the CEO of Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg was going to become the chairman/CEO of Meta. That hasn't happened. So obviously Zuck still has, full control. And outside of that, there is some corporate restructure or corporate re-emphasis that's going on. Reality Labs is going to lead them into the future. This week, Zuckerberg also talked about the fact that, it's all about, focusing on young users, and they don't care as much about boomers. I'm paraphrasing, but that was sort of the way he put it. And so that's what the future for Facebook is going to look like. It's going to be about young adults. If you look through some of those Facebook papers, you can see that Facebook has a serious problem with the kids. And so it's going to work to fix that, and then try to put this, Reality Labs, the Portal, the Oculus, and then augmented reality front and center. But, it's a risky bet because, social media is live and thriving. There's 3.5 billion plus people that use Facebook's family of apps, much less using, these devices. So, and also less of a use case and less of an immediate payoff. So the growth numbers will look good because you're starting from a really small base. But overall, it will be tough for them to turn their Reality Labs into the same blockbuster success as, business-wise, at least, that Facebook has been. And so what it gives us is another 5 years of extremely interesting stories and plot lines with this, persistently compelling company. And so here we go.
Yeah, let's get ready. Alex Kantrowitz, I want to thank you so much for joining us today to talk about this, to digest, to try to climb through all of these different announcements. We appreciate your time. Of course, folks should check out the Big Technology Podcast. If they want to follow you online and check out all of your great work, where do they go to do so?
Yeah, the best place to do that is either the Big Technology Podcast or Big Technology on Substack. It's bigtechnology.substack.com. If you sign up, I'll email you once a week on Thursday. It's free, and put all my reporting in there. So that's the best place.
Awesome. Thanks again. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, guys. It's been meta.
Indeed it has.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Let's take a quick break before we come back with my story of the week. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Akamai. Akamai powers and protects life online and is changing how we live, how we work, and how we play. If you want to be on the cutting edge of innovation, then you need to be operating at the edge of the internet. And nobody can get you there better than Akamai, because Akamai has 10 times the locations of the nearest competitor. That's more than 4,000 locations. You are always closer to your end user with Akamai. Akamai has built the largest and most sophisticated edge platform in the world so that the biggest innovators can power and protect their greatest ambitions. Visit akamai.com/TNW to see how Akamai powers and protects life online for your customers. Akamai stops some of the most dangerous threats launched at the internet and everyone online every day. Their unrivaled edge platform intelligence sees more internet conditions in order to avoid bottlenecks and defend at the edge. Akamai's industry-leading 0-second SLA and 100% platform availability means they have your back, and they're not afraid to stand behind their commitments. All Akamai-backed SLAs include time to mitigate, quality of mitigation, time to alert notification, time to respond, time to access a mitigation resource, and individual TMM SLAs based on specific attack vectors. In short, Akamai keeps your digital experience closer to users than anyone and threats farther away. With Akamai, you can provide the best possible experience for your customers. Your customers will get the content, the apps, the sites, and the video they need without lag, interruption, or latency during unexpected traffic spikes. You can prepare for spikes in demand and optimize resources to provide the best experience for your customers. You will be amazed at Akamai's unparalleled performance, and you'll always be one network hop away from 85% of the world's internet users. You know Akamai and their reputation, but don't just take our word for it. Akamai is trusted by all top 50 global media companies, all top 20 global e-commerce companies, all top 50 global telecom carriers, and more than 500 banks globally, including the top 25 in the US and 22 of the top 25 and in EMEA. Akamai is there powering and protecting digital experiences in a way that no one else can. You're getting 10 times the locations of competitors for the fastest customer experience available, and you're getting the market leader in CDN, video delivery, web performance, DDoS prevention, web application firewall. No one can compete with Akamai when it comes to setting you up for success and scalability online. So check out akamai.com/TNW to learn how Akamai powers and protects life online. Give your customers the best possible experience online and see for yourself what life with Akamai is all about. That's akamai.com/TNW. And our thanks to Akamai for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, we are back to the show. And I just wanted to, this is not a huge story, but we actually had a brief mention of it during this last chat. Specifically talking about Apple's new privacy policies. And Alex Kantrowitz touched on the fact that one of the things that has hurt Facebook is the privacy policy that Apple has implemented. So Apple set up this technology in iOS. Originally, it was supposed to come out at an earlier version of iOS. iOS 15 has kind of the full and complete version of it. And it was this ask apps not to track feature. And essentially what this did is it said, all apps have to ask you if they can track you across different services. So think of it like this. I'm in Facebook and I do a thing, and then I leave Facebook and go into Snapchat, for example, and do a thing. Snapchat and Facebook can communicate in the back end saying, my activity that's happening here can be, given to Facebook for them to be able to know. And then all of these profiles can kind of be put together to create a whole bunch of data about what I do. Snapchat and Facebook came out with their earnings reports. And in their earnings reports, both fell short of what the expectations were. And so they both decided that it was Apple's fault that they did not have as great of ad sales as they have in the past. And part of that is because of the way that advertising works on Facebook and Snapchat. They're kind of, what's interesting is the different types of advertising that take place and the different types of ad sales that take place as a result. Google actually saw an uptick in advertising, and that's because its version of advertising is different from companies like Apple, or like Facebook and Snapchat. When it comes to Google, it's a more direct, and I'm trying to remember what, customer intent versus data collection. So with Google, I do a search for a product or a thing because my intent is to look for that thing. So then Google shows me ads based on what I've searched. And that is a very easy way for the company to know what you are looking for. And so advertisers can also go, oh, heck yes, we want to advertise with Google because this is very clearly a way that we can show a customer who is looking for a specific thing, the thing that they're looking for, and then you buy it. Whereas with Facebook and Snapchat, they are monitoring what you do on the web and trying to get a better picture of you to serve you ads based on what you're doing. And if they don't have the ability to track you outside of their own apps, that gets a little bit harder. There's not as much data available. And that has led to a decrease in Facebook ad spending. It's led to a decrease in Snapchat ad spending. And companies who are trying to advertise are less likely to as well because they're not getting as much of that rich, delicious data that they're after. But on top of that, I found it interesting, the kind of other type of ad sale, the other type of advertising attention is Twitter. Twitter actually did a pretty good job. It says up 41% from a year earlier. That's its ad sales. 41% jump since last year. And that it wasn't affected by Apple's change to protect users' privacy, because most of the time, advertisers that are spending on Twitter are spending simply for brand recognition. They want more people to know about their brand. And so there's not as much tracking involved. You don't as often it's not a direct, yes, they clicked on this link, yes, they tapped this thing. It's more, how many people did we get to see this ad, to see this sponsored tweet? And so it's a little bit easier in a world where Apple is protecting your privacy across apps to still have that be of value. But I think the important thing that people have to understand is that while you can ask the app not to track, and while there's this sort of third-party block between the different apps, keep in mind that everything you're doing within the app, that doesn't change. So if you, I don't want anyone to get the impression that whenever they say, no, don't track me, that it means that the behavior you have within the app itself is suddenly not being tracked. That is not the case. Anything you do in someone's, just if I had a gym, and the gym had cameras in it because it's for security's sake or whatever. You walk into my gym, and everything you do in my gym, I can see. I can see what you're doing in the gym. So you have to think of these apps like this. You walk into the Facebook app, and everything you're doing within the Facebook app is obviously able to be seen by Facebook. It's what you're doing in the Facebook app, or the Instagram app, or the Snapchat app, or what have you. So the impression I think sometimes people get is that if they turn these features on, then nothing that they do are going to be tracked. But that's not the same thing as what this actually is, which is cross-site tracking, and these companies being able to pool their data on you and develop a profile of you. So just keep that in mind. Even when these companies are kind of wah about the fact that they're not being able to track you across different sites, they still are getting a chunk of data from you every time you use their specific services, which makes this whole metaverse thing all the more interesting and perhaps terrifying. If the metaverse becomes a true thing and Facebook is the first to it, then they know that it's like the US putting a flag into the moon. Even if other companies come afterward, even if other countries come afterward to plant their flag, there was still the one that did it first, and a lot of people are going to latch into that. And we're sort of averse to change and to having to completely go through new types of setups and all that kind of stuff. The friction there keeps more people locked in. So a company becomes the metaverse first, and then maybe other companies do it too. But there's all that friction of like, oh man, but I've already got this all set up. I've got my perfect avatar, et cetera, et cetera. So this is all very interesting as a whole, kind of how these companies are trying to survive, as they put it, with Apple's protections in place, and what companies are thriving even under these new privacy rules that Apple has.
Yeah, it's an important distinction that you're bringing up as far as the taking the metaverse as the example, or just Oculus, the Oculus Quest as the example. When Facebook releases an Oculus Quest and you're in that environment doing whatever it is you're doing, whether that data is shared with anyone else outside of Facebook, like that's one consideration. That would be, Apple, allowing other companies to track this data or not. It would be the comparison. But Facebook is always kind of at the center of that information. So whether that's going out to these other companies and affecting their advertising model, as is the case with some of these earnings reports, it's still Apple, in that case, that has the benefit of understanding everything potentially. On a Quest, like it was news not too long ago, I can't remember when this was, but that they were working on potentially bringing eye tracking into the device and all of these features that sound really great. But then when you start thinking about, okay, but if their motivation as a company is, on advertising and tracking data and marketing that data in some way, shape, or form, then eye tracking as a cool technology suddenly becomes a vector for knowing even more exactly what you're interested in, what you're looking at, which is a layer that we haven't even gone to in, largely when we're browsing using TikTok, TikTok's algorithm is very good at understanding when we stop for a split second on something that maybe that's because we're interested in that something, and starts offering up a bunch more of those things. And the more we stop, the more we're sending that message that that's exactly what we are looking for, whether we realize it or not, you know. And that, I think, is where things get a little messy. Is as users, we don't always know or understand that those signals are being tracked and are being understood. Who is that information going to? Is it staying in Apple's walled garden, or is it being transmitted outward? And Apple's done, you know, some really great things as far as privacy is concerned and locking these things down. But, you know, make no mistake, Apple still has access to a lot of that information. So if that's truly like an end of road for you as far as using a product, like you always kind of have to ask yourself, you know, am I comfortable with even the company that I'm using this product? You know, that information might not be going outside of the device to a different, you know, entity, but they have access to it. And do I feel okay with that?
Yep, well put.
Yeah. Interesting stuff, and very interesting to see. Like, this was totally earnings week. You know, everybody had their earnings this week, and really fascinating to see the winners and the losers in light of those changes by Apple. Like, I'm not sure that I would have guessed that Twitter's kind of ad approach is more about brand recognition and not direct, you know, what is it, direct interaction or whatever. Like, I see those ads. I don't know that my eyes see the ads on Twitter any differently than they see them in another social network. So I don't understand why there's a difference. What is the difference? What is the distinction? Apparently there is, but my eyes don't see a difference. It's still just an ad, and I'm going to skip over it.
Exactly. Scroll. Scroll.
Oh, there's an ad. Starting to see ads in your replies now. Have you seen that on Twitter?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a little
and then
different.
Occasionally I'll get a pop-up or something that'll say, did you see this ad about some alcohol brand or something? And I'm like, no, because my brain just completely magic erasers those out. So sorry.
Yes. Yeah. Magic erasers. Nice. All right. So coming up, a new version of Android is not the one that you think it is. Compelling? It's very interesting. We're going to talk about that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Melissa. And Melissa is all about customer information, customer data. If you have a product, if you have a service, you want the most up-to-date information about the people who are using the product, or if they're, you know, interacting with a field, you want the right information being inserted into there. Sometimes it happens magically with very little information. That's Melissa at work. Did you know that nearly 36 million address changes were processed by the U.S. Postal Service in 2020. That is a huge chunk of customers that you could be missing out on. 30% of customer data goes bad every year. But Melissa can help make sure your data is current and accurate. Melissa's tools have helped businesses maintain fresh data for more than 35 years. Melissa's been around for a while, which explains why over 10,000 businesses trust the address experts. Melissa has a renewal rate of over 92%. Proof that companies do love Melissa, and you will too. So you can verify addresses, emails, phone numbers, names. It all happens in real time with Melissa. So, you know, that it's the experience when you go to a field and you enter in your zip code, and then it auto-populates a bunch of stuff, or you enter in your street address and it gives you that pull down and gives you a couple of the matches, and it's just as easy as a click, and boom, everything's in there without you having to enter it. That's the kind of effect that we're looking at here. You can verify addresses, emails, phone numbers, names in real time. Melissa's global address verification service verifies addresses for more than 240 countries and territories at the point of entry. So when you're entering it in, there it is. And if you're tired of having duplicate customer information in your database, well, Melissa's data matching can eliminate clutter, eliminate those duplicates, and that ultimately that increases your accuracy of the database and reduces, in the end, the postage and mailing costs associated with that. Get the information that completes your customer profiles better. You can add consumer demographic information to your records, marital status, social media handles. That's super important. Melissa's flexible deployment options offer different platforms to suit any preference, any business size, any budget, with flexible on-premise web service, secure FTP processing, and software as a service delivery options. Melissa also has their new Lookups app, and you can find that on iOS and on Google, to search addresses, names, and more right at your fingertips. Super easy to do. Melissa continually undergoes independent security audits to reinforce their commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. They're SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliant as well. Melissa's Global Support Center offers 24/7 world-renowned support if you sign up for a service level agreement, and you can acquire today about that. Melissa's still supporting communities as well and qualifying essential workers during COVID-19. So you can actually see if your organization qualifies for 6 months of free service by applying online. Just go to melissa.com to do that. And finally, G2 Crowd's Fall 2021 report actually ranked Melissa as a leader in both address verification and data quality software. So you know they're meeting the diverse needs of their customers. No surprise that they ranked so highly. Congratulations, Melissa. Make sure your customer contact data is up to date. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's super easy to log on, sign up, and just get started playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Doesn't matter what time it is, just do it. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit. All right. So Android 12 is the latest and greatest version of Android, right? Right? That's what everybody keeps saying. That's what we thought.
I thought so.
And then yesterday happened, like literally Android 12 was released on a public sense to all Pixel phones like a week ago, a little more than a week ago. And boom, we've got the next version of Android. Although it's not the next full version. It's not like suddenly we're talking about Android 13 here. We're talking about
Android
a version.
Cocoa Puff.
Right. No, C was a long time ago. C was years ago in the dessert matrix.
Oops.
But this this new version is Android 12L. So I don't know what you do as far as the dessert is concerned with 12L.
Android 12 Lollipop.
Lollipop again.
The repeat. Yeah.
Lollipop part 2. It's this time around, it's a focus on tablets and foldables, or maybe it should be a focus on foldables and tablets, because tablets have largely been ignored by Google for many years on the Android platform, which is not to say that there aren't tablets out there. It's just Google, when was it? Android 3.0 was Honeycomb. That was 10 years ago. That was the Android version that was really tailored around tablets. So, they released Honeycomb specifically for tablet interaction. And, they were going strong. I don't know if you ever had your hands on the Nexus 7, but in the Android world, the Nexus 7 was a really great kind of smaller form factor tablet. That was back in 2013. A lot of interest in that tablet, and everybody, I loved that tablet. It was a really well-received tablet. But then Google just kind of seemed to lose interest in tablets. Which is not to say, again, that tablets don't exist in the Android world. Companies like Samsung are making really solid tablets running Android, but those companies have really, in many ways, had to create their tablet experience and create those features because Google's been kind of distant and hasn't really paid a whole lot of attention to improving its tablet experience. It's really focused more on the phone. And so when you end up using an Android tablet, it really does feel like you're using a Android phone, but with a large screen, and not in a good way. We can talk about how iPad does that differently in a second, because I'm curious to get your take on that. But as a result, there hasn't been a whole lot of incentive from developers to make their apps more big screen friendly. It's kind of like that chicken and egg scenario, right? So that's been a really big downside. And now we have this Android 12L announcement, which, as Google said, this is all about larger screen devices. And so in that umbrella, that is tablets. It's also foldables. And I think foldables is probably the one to highlight more because we're seeing a lot more foldable action. There's a lot of energy in the Android ecosystem around foldables, and many people saying, oh, foldables are the future of smartphones. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think they're interesting, but I don't know if like 10 years from now, we're all going to have foldables. Maybe I'm short-sighted. But this is really about bringing more functionality into Android that again, manufacturers have had to kind of bake in on their own with their own solution. Google likes to see what people are doing with those devices and then bring it in more of an official sense on the OS, so that it can be streamlined. It's easier to manage. It's easier for the user because things are consistent. So some of those changes include a taskbar along the bottom of the screen, which seems like such a simple inclusion, but a little taskbar with pinned and docked app icons, the ability to drag those icons onto either side of the screen and jump right into a split screen experience, which if you have a large display device can be really useful for multitasking, that sort of thing. Side-by-side notifications and quick settings layout. Right now, on a phone, you pull up down your notifications and then you pull it down again, and above the notifications appears the quick settings. On a bigger screen device, that's a lot of wasted space. So now they're working this out so that notifications and quick settings kind of have a shared layout. And that's just a couple of things that Google was showing off there. But this is coming. I mean, basically, you can get the developer preview right now, and this also runs on phones. Even though it's really designed for larger screen devices, you can install this right now. You can sign it. If you were signed up for the Android 12 beta, I think you're automatically able to jump right into this. Google has said the roadmap, is the next 3 months of betas, and with an official launch of this or release sometime, it kind of looks on the timetable like Marchish would be the earliest that would happen. But my question for you, Mikah, is that Android has been around for a long time, obviously, very successful in the phone space. Tablets have always been a weakness on the Android platform. But that's not to say that tablets are a weakness in general, because the iPad has been incredibly successful for Apple. And sometimes I have a hard time understanding, and I'm curious to know your thought on this. What is the missing mojo? What is the mojo that the iPad has, in your view, that Android devices are missing out on? Is it app compatibility? Is it the fact that Apple has just done certain things to make the tablet experience its own from the phone experience? What is your thought on that?
Well, I think that part of it is what I talked about earlier, planting your flag on the moon. When Apple announced the first iPad and really kicked that off with, selling this device that was a larger screen device that had the built-in ability to read books and subscribe to newspapers, and it was your magazine rack all in one little device. They really sold it at that point, and I think that to this day they still benefit from being a tablet that, in many ways, I'm sure that there were other tablet-style devices when the iPad launched, but this single-purpose device that didn't have a stylus, that you didn't have to have all these extra things. You just plugged it in to charge it, and then you could use it wherever you wanted to. I think that did play a role in setting the foundation for Apple's ongoing success. At this point, I honestly am not sure, because there are lots of devices that are almost at parity with what the iPad can do, other tablet makers that do it. And I wonder if it's just sort of the longevity of the iPad in the market, that plays such a big role. It's like, it's almost a proprietary eponym where people, instead of saying tablet, they refer to all of these devices as iPads. Even,
so true.
I can remember them. I can't remember, but there was some newscaster who was calling this Microsoft Surface tablet an iPad over and over again. And it was like, no, that's...
my kids do this. My kids totally do this with their tablets. They have Android tablets, and they always call them iPads. And I've given up on correcting them, because I'm like, okay, that's a strange hill to die on. Like, if you want to call it an iPad, go for it. It's a tablet, but they call it an iPad. It's just kind of a synonym for it.
Yeah. So that's where, I mean, I don't know. It is good that I think for the people who have these devices that run Android, that will be able to add these new features with some multitasking and multi-window views, that's fantastic. And it does bring it more in line with what iPad OS offers. What's been fascinating is while other companies are trying to make tablets that sell, Apple successfully did that and now is trying to make iPads that are not far off from being sort of computers for people. And I think that's a big role as well. People have iPhones and they get used to that operating system, and having to have two different operating systems is not necessarily something that everyone wants to do. So I can have some familiarity with iPad OS on my iPad, iOS on my iPhone, and not do so much sort of mental gymnastics to bounce between the two. Whereas I am happy to have macOS be a whole completely different platform from those things. And I like macOS as it is. I think some people are good to want to stay to the same thing. So yeah, I really don't know, other than the iPad has just sort of embedded itself culturally as the tablet of choice for some reason. But again, the flag on the moon thing does seem to be a big part of that.
Well, and it is an experience that is, at least in my estimation, just kind of more enjoyable than using a lot of the Android tablets that I've used. But again, I have a hard time putting my finger on exactly why. Like, they're both basically doing the same thing. I mean, it could just come down to the app support, and the developers on Android have taken less time, gone through, spent less time making sure that their apps are the right tablet experience. They spend the majority of their time making their apps a great phone experience. And yes, technically, like, the phone experience can scale to a tablet and it works fine, but it's not as customized to a tablet as it could be. And maybe that's the difference. It seems like on the Apple side of things, developers really understand that, like, phones and tablets, they're two different beasts entirely, and they kind of, each deserves their own separate paradigms. Some things are the same, but some things are very different. Maybe that's it. But anyways, I'm curious to see what this leads to. We've heard plenty of rumors about Pixel foldables. And we had heard rumors about this version of Android. It had been rumored to be 12.1 was the guessed name, the name that folks at XDA were guessing. But there were some rumors that tied these two together to say that one is the preparation for the other, which is to say that Android 12L, whatever they end up calling it at launch, when it comes out, it's possible that it comes out to lay the groundwork for a Pixel foldable that Google would put out. And so maybe that means early to mid next year, or we might hear something about a Pixel foldable. At this point, I'm kind of the mind of I'll believe it when I see it, but there's been a good amount of rumors. Like, we know that there's some action happening at Google around a Pixel foldable. I just don't know if it's going to be released, and if so, when. So we'll have to wait and see. But I'm also very curious to know, like, does this revitalize things on the tablet side? Because that could have immediate, see immediate benefits if that's the case. But that is it for this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. Thank you so much for watching and listening. It was fun having a little opportunity to do some breaking news earlier. That rarely happens on this show, so that was great having Alex Kantrowitz here for the full half hour during Facebook's big Meta announcement. You can follow this show every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. We upload the feed, we update the feeds that are there, so audio feeds, video feeds, your podcatchers of choice, they're all listed there. YouTube, anything, whatever your preference is for following the show, you can find it at twit.tv/TNW.
Also, if you'd like to get all of our shows ad-free, well, check out Club Twit. For $7 a month, you get every Twit show with no ads. You get access to the exclusive Twit Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else, behind the scenes, after the scenes, over the scenes, above the scenes, etc. It's all the fun stuff that doesn't make it to the final show. Then there's access to the members-only Discord server, which we love. It's a place for you to chat with your fellow Club TWiT members, as well as all of us here at TWiT, and occasionally pop up in shows for question and answer segments, etc. Plus, with Ant Pruitt running the helm there, we've got great content that you won't be able to get outside of Club TWiT, including some fun Ask Me Anythings, fireside chats, etc. Right there. So head to twit.tv/clubtwit to check it out. $7 a month, and you get some awesome goodies. We also got some feedback that folks wanted to be able to support shows directly. Well, if you subscribe to the shows on Apple Podcasts, you can support your show, your favorite show, directly. You just find the audio feed of Tech News Weekly, for example, in Apple Podcasts, and for $2.99 a month, you can subscribe and get the ad-free version of the audio feed. So that is a way that you can say, hey, this show, I want to give a little bit of change to, and in doing so, you get the ad-free version. If you'd like to tweet at me or follow me on social media, I am at Mikah Sargent on pretty much all of the social media networks, or you can head to chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I am most active. A little later today, you can check out Smart Tech Today, which I host with Matthew Casanelli. And coming up on Tuesday, you can check out iOS Today, which I host with Rose Mary Orchard. Looking forward to that episode where we talk about SharePlay on iOS, Apple's new FaceTime feature. So lots to talk about there. Jason, what about you?
Nice. Well, I'm at Jason Howell on Twitter. And if you go to my profile on Twitter right now, you'll see pinned to the very top a link to something that I'm doing for the month of November. Kind of got a head start on it. I'm doing my very first Movember, which means this wonderfully shaven face is going to have some amount of hair by the end of the month, all in an effort to raise awareness and raise funds for mental health and men's health. So go to @JasonHowell, and like I said, pinned up at the top of my Twitter profile, you'll find a link to it. Or you can go to movember.com/m/JasonHowellTwit and take a look. And I apologize in advance. I've never grown my hair out of my face before. Like literally, I've never done it in my life, more than maybe like 6 days-ish. And that's because like what you see right now, this is 3 days. This is how slow my hair grows. So I've just never done it. I've just always assumed like, oh, it's going to look awful. It's never going to, like, nothing's going to grow. So we're going to put it to the test, all in an effort to raise awareness for mental health. So check it out. And I'm sorry for however weird I look.
Check it out, and I'm sorry.
Exactly. Big thanks to John Ashley, to Burke, to John Slanina, everybody who helps us do this show each and every week. And thanks to you for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
So you got yourself the brand new latest and greatest iPhone or Samsung smartphone because you heard about all of the beautiful photography those things can create. But for some reason, you're just not quite getting it done when you try to make your photos. Or you got yourself a brand new camera because you were interested in getting started in photography, but your little new inexpensive camera still isn't quite cutting it. Well, you need to check out my show, Hands-On Photography, here on TWiT. I'm going to show you how to be a better photographer and a better post-processor, and quite frankly, just help you get the most out of that new camera that's either on your phone or the brand new one that you just got for your birthday or gifts or what have you. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So head on over to twit.tv/hop. That's twit.tv/HOP and subscribe today.